It's Shabalala! Goal! Bafana! Bafana! Goal for South Africa! Goal for all Africa!
Divisive and ridiculed, why is the 2010 World Cup continuously seen as one of the worst World Cups of all time? In this video, I aim to tell the story of the most diverse and compelling World Cups there has ever been, analysing its successes and failures, delving deep into the heart of the story, and concluding why this is the World Cup I love the most.
I discovered it with you. Connu? The 2010 FIFA World Cup will be organized in South Africa.
This was the joyous moment in 2003 that South Africa learned that they would be hosting the 2010 World Cup. The nation had suffered heartbreak in 2000 when they lost the bid into the 2006 World Cup in controversial circumstances to Germany. For your information, I plan on covering the corruption in the 2006 and the 2010 World Cup bids in a later video, so make sure to drop a subscribe below. Regardless of the controversy, this was a big moment for football, not just in South Africa, but in all of Africa and across the globe. And with the host confirmed, the countdown to the 2010 World Cup had begun. The road to the World Cup can be a long, arduous journey for many nations across the world. Qualification can throw up its fair share of curveballs, and none was more compelling than the case of France versus Ireland. After a disappointing qualification, Les Bleus had to go through the playoff system to attempt to qualify for the 2010 World Cup. France were drawn against Ireland, and after the first leg, France were 1-0 up thanks to a goal from Nicolas Anelka. The second leg was expected to be a comfortable victory for France, especially since they were at home. But football has a habit of throwing up unexpected results. Robbie Keane drew the game level and sent it into extra time. With the match in the balance, a free kick was whipped in, Thierry Henry controlled it with his arm, knocked it back across, and William Gallas turned in. Ireland were furious, but the referees didn't see it. With no VAR, France prevailed in the most controversial of circumstances. But karma has a habit of coming back around. Among the other missing teams were Euro 2008 semi-finalists Russia and Turkey, alongside future big nations of Croatia and Belgium. While the qualification had been exciting, South Africa as a nation was preparing for the tournament. 5 stadiums had to be built, with a further 5 having to be upgraded. Additionally, South Africa had to pour a lot of resources into improving their public transport network as well. But as the tournament approached, it was utterly commendable how well South Africa had done in being ready for this tournament. This was the first global tournament to be held to this scale in Africa, and South Africa had only just overcome apartheid 20 years earlier. Yet it tackled its problems head on and welcomed the world to show a new image of South Africa, one that had moved on from segregation and corruption to one of tolerance and understanding. Now it's time to look at the draw for the World Cup. As hosts, South Africa entered into Group A alongside Uruguay, Mexico and France. And at the final draw, it's clear they felt hard done by.
I think that sometimes no comments speak louder than words. A4.
A4, thank you.
Group B saw Diego Maradona-led Argentina take on South Korea, Greece and Nigeria. Group C was where the 3 lions were drawn, with the Sun newspaper stating it was easy and it was the best English group since the Beatles. I'm sure that overconfidence is warranted. It featured Algeria, Slovenia and the United States alongside them. Group D features the Germans with Serbia, Australia and Ghana. Group E had the Netherlands squaring off against Japan, Cameroon and Denmark. Group F had the holders of the World Cup, Italy, squaring off against Paraguay, New Zealand and Slovakia. Penultimately, Group G was seen as the group of death. Brazil, Portugal and the Ivory Coast all battling it out together. Oh, and North Korea was in the group as well. And lastly, we had Group H, which saw Spain take on Chile, Switzerland and Honduras. And with that, the stage was set. June 11th, 2010, the opening game of the World Cup. South Africa versus Mexico would take centre stage. With the first half being cagey, another question was on the lips of everyone. What the hell was that noise? The Vuvuzela, the sound of a swarm of bees attacking you, was the soundtrack to the tournament. Actually, it's Waka Waka by Shakira, which, by the way, banger of a song. Coupled with Kanan waving flag, this tournament was unreal for music. No tournament even comes close. Sorry, back to the point. The Vuvuzela would steadily annoy every viewer in every match for the entire tournament. Well, annoy everyone except for me. For some reason, 12-year-old me enjoyed the sound of invasive white noise with no tune or rhythm at all. FIFA would later ban the Vuvuzela in tournaments after the fact, but no one can doubt it was certainly iconic. Back to the game though, and going into the second half, the score was tied at 0-0. Surely someone had to be the hero though, step up and be counted, announce themselves on the world stage.
Shabalala!
Oh yes, the most recognisable World Cup opening goal of all time. A thunderbolt from a winger playing domestically in South Africa made the entirety of Africa erupt. Sadly, South Africa were unable to hold on to their win though, with Rafael Marquez scoring the equaliser late on in the game as it ended 1-1. Over in Group C, we saw the Three Lions kick off, and what a perfect start they got off to. 4 minutes in, Emil Heskey teed up Steven Gerrard, and Capello's men were on their way to the Jules Rimet crown. Well, that was until Rob Green made one of the most catastrophic errors in World Cup history.
Oh, Rob Green's let it in!
England would go on to hang on for a draw, and Rob Green would never play another minute for England at an international tournament again. One of the biggest sticking points early on in the tournament, though, was the ball itself. The Jabulani was its name, and it was beautiful. Slight problem though, it just didn't fly straight. Thus, in the first round of matches, few goals were scored because the ball just kept rising. The Germans didn't seem to notice. They smashed 4 past Australia, making it look easy. Turns out they'd been using the ball in the Bundesliga for 6 months before the tournament had even begun, and thus were very prepared by the time the tournament came around. Trust those pesky Germans to find a workaround. Over in Group G, the perceived all-important match between the Ivory Coast and Portugal was both sides' opening game. A 0-0 draw played out between the two, leaving it wide open for who would qualify. Lastly, in Group H, Euros 2008 winners and favourites to win the tournament, Spain kicked off with a 1-0 loss to Switzerland. They what? They lost 1-0 to Switzerland? How did they manage that? Yet, for some reason, the Swiss, who for some reason qualify for every tournament, managed to put the entire world into a tailspin when they beat Spain by 1-0. Back in Group A, and with the dust settled, South Africa took on Uruguay in their second game. Unfortunately, during the tournament, Diego Forlan turned into the best striker in the world and scored 2 over South Africa as they lost 3-0. Elsewhere, France, who got a credible, if uninspiring, 0-0 draw in their opening game against Uruguay, lost to Mexico by 2-0, making their chance of qualification incredibly slim. And things went from bad to worse when striker Nicolas Anelka was seen arguing with their manager during the match. The next day, Dominic sent the player home, and the players went into a revolt supporting Nicolas Anelka. It actually required the intervention of the France president Nicolas Sarkozy to remedy the situation in the squad. Despite this though, they were taking on South Africa in the last game, and surely they would be able to overcome a very ordinary side. Over in Group B, Argentina were doing exactly what was expected. 2 wins from 2, with the second being a demolition job on South Korea, saw Argentina gaining some traction. Back to England and Group C, Capello's men had the chance to banish their demons of the first game and get their first victory. David James now in between the sticks. England would get a clean sheet against Algeria. Shame they couldn't score though. The match was an incredibly dull affair, with the best moment coming after the full-time whistle.
Nice to see your whole fans booing you. That's what Bullet supporters.
That was disappointing. In Group D now, and as stated, Germany dominated Australia by 4-0 in their first game. So obviously they went and lost 1-0 to Serbia. They lost 1-0 to Serbia. Why? They'd just shown they could demolish Australia, but they've been using the ball for much. Is no one going to be consistent in this entire tournament? Whatever. Looking over at Group F, something strange was happening there too. Italy, they were doing in England. 2 matches played, 2 draws, and Italy had to come from behind in both games. It would be left to beating Slovakia in the last game of the group to see if they could qualify for the next round. In Group G, having played out a very respectable 2-1 loss, North Korea decided it would televise their match against Portugal live to the nation. Well, they saw an hour of it. After Thiago's 4th goal, transmission was cut, probably to spare their blushes, or maybe something more sinister. Either way, I don't want to know. Anyway, they lost 7-0 to Portugal, and the fans inside the stadium were fuming. Yeah, turns out North Korea had hired Chinese actors to pretend to be their fans in the stadium. Carnage. And now we head into the final group games, the all-important ones to see who will qualify for the knockout round. So obviously Raymond Dominic left out his best players, including Thierry Henry, Florent Malouda, Frank Ribéry, Eric Abidal, in a move that can only be described as bold. And somehow doing this led to them to lose 2-1 to South Africa. Who would have thought? Sadly for South Africa though, this was only enough for them to finish 3rd in the group, and they would be the first hosts ever to be knocked out in the group stage. In Groups B and E, Argentina and the Netherlands decided to be the only 2 nations to sail through with a 100% win record. They were both joined by 2002 World Cup hosts Japan and South Korea into the next round. England were relying on a win against Slovenia and delivered in the most underwhelming way. A 1-0 win from a Jermaine Defoe goal was enough to slip through in 2nd place, finishing behind the USA. This would mean England would play Germany in the last 16, with Jurgen Klinsmann's men recovering from their defeat against Serbia to comfortably beat Ghana. In Group F, the ramifications were simple. Italy had to beat Slovakia. And that didn't happen either. Slovakia beat the holders of the competition by 3-2, meaning neither 2006 World Cup finalists, Italy and France, were through to the knockout stage. Elsewhere, New Zealand were about to win a very unconventional award. They would be the 2010 World Cup only undefeated team. Apologies for the spoiler. They drew all 3 of their group matches, finishing 3rd and getting knocked out. In the final groups, G and H, Brazil took on Portugal, where a draw was played out that saw both nations go through. Spain recovered from their opening game defeat to win the group, progressing alongside Chile, which would set up an all-Iberian last 16 match between Spain and Portugal. Into the knockout stages of the tournament then, the all-or-nothing side of the tournament. Would there be more shocks, controversy and all-round lunacy? Of course there would be. One narrative that had been developing in the undergrowth without much traction was that Uruguay were really good. They took on South Korea in the last 16 and won 2-1 thanks to a brace from a very young Luis Suarez. Elsewhere, Asamoah Gyan mania had reached a fever pitch, with him scoring the winner in extra time to knock out the United States. The next day opens with Germany versus England, and a comfortable victory for the Deutschland was expected. But England fans always believe. 32 minutes in though, and Germany are 2-0 up, until Matthew Upson, of all people, halves the deficit to 2-1. Minutes after, that moment happens. Lampard scored, but it didn't count. Pundits were incensed, fans furious, that players were in disbelief. What could have been a... Well, Germany ended up winning 4-1, so they probably would have won anyway. Nevertheless, this would be the last World Cup without goal line technology. Elsewhere, Argentina were continuing their good run. They won 3-1 against Mexico, seeing them go through with goals from Higuain and Tevez. Could Diego Maradona's men take them all the way? Speaking of good runs, the Netherlands shot through to the quarterfinals with a 2-1 victory over Slovakia, whilst Brazil comfortably dispatched Chile by 3-0. The final 2 last 16 ties saw Paraguay take on Japan and Spain face Portugal. Nothing could separate Paraguay or Japan after 120 minutes, which saw them go to penalties, with Paraguay prevailing, taking them to the last 8 for the first time in their history. Spain snuck through against Portugal meanwhile, with David Villa being the difference maker. The quarterfinals are where the tournament started to heat up again, starting with the Netherlands versus Brazil. Both nations were having great tournaments and believed they could go all the way. Brazil headed the South Americans into the lead until the Netherlands played their trump card. The bald magician Wesley Sneijder pulled back a goal before putting in the winner to send the Netherlands through by 2-1. The second quarterfinal, Uruguay versus Ghana, was perhaps one of the most controversial World Cup matches in history. With the game tied at 1-1 in extra time and penalties looming, Ghana whipped in a free kick, a melee ensued, a header was planted towards the goal and Luis Suarez handballed it off the line. The referee immediately sent him off and all Asamoah Gyan had to do was pop away the subsequent penalty and Ghana would be through. However, he couldn't manage it. The penalty struck the bar and went over and Luis Suarez celebrated like he'd won the whole tournament. The penalty shootout came next, and in the most unfashionable style, Uruguay overcome Ghana by 4-2 to head to the last 4, and Ghana were absolutely incensed. The last African side had been knocked out, and Uruguay cheated to do so. Next came Germany versus Argentina. Maradona and co had sauntered through every game up until this point and were being talked about as potential winners. That was until Germany battered them 4-0 and Miroslav Klose and Thomas Müller do what they do best: score lots of international goals. Last up was Paraguay versus Spain. The South Americans had done far better than expectations and would have been forgiven if they would have lost heavily to the past masters of Spain. However, that wasn't what happened. It took Spain till the 83rd minute to find a winner through David Villa once again. Paraguay went home proud, but Del Bosque's side carried on. This led us to our final 4 then. Uruguay, the Netherlands, Germany and Spain. Only one team could prevail, but all were hungry for victory. Uruguay versus the Netherlands came first, and no one could have predicted what Giovanni van Bronckhorst would do. The left back strike was the goal of the entire tournament and sent the Netherlands on their way to a 3-2 victory. The Dutch would be progressing to the final, whilst Uruguay would have to settle for the 3rd place playoff. Germany versus Spain had the billing to be an absolute corker. Germany had scored 8 goals in their last 2 games in the knockout, but they couldn't overcome Spain's possession-based system. This time, the difference maker was legendary defender Carlos Puyol. With Spain joining the Netherlands in the final, it means the tournament would have a new winner, with neither side ever winning the tournament before. First, though, was the small matter of the 3rd place playoff. Usually a dead rubber, this game was anything but. Germany struck first before Uruguay turned it to 2-1, before it flipped back again to Germany, who went out 3-2 winners. Sami Khedira scoring the winner for Germany. Nonetheless, the final had arrived. One of Spain or the Netherlands would be lifting that trophy for the first time in each nation's history. Spain had played lovely, acute, possession-based football throughout the entire tournament, whilst the Netherlands had played a very expansive, open attacking system. They utilised Schneider in the number 10. They had Robin bursting down the wing. They had the technical genius of Robin van Persie up front. So would you be surprised if I told you that both sides forgot about that and just decided to kick the living crap out of each other instead? What? This is the last time I'm doing this. Spain, beautiful football. The Netherlands, total football. What, and they just decided to kick each other, did they? Oh, yeah, they actually did. So Howard Webb refereed the World Cup final. What was going on in 2010? Well, anyway, he gave out 14 yellow cards and 1 red card. So that pretty much sums it up. Regardless, the game crept on at 0-0 while both sides just knocked the living daylights out of one another. And just as it was going to penalties, one of the sides would find the winner. Legendary midfielder Andre Iniesta prodding home a pass from Cesc Fabregas saw Spain beat the Netherlands by 1-0 in the final. So there we go. Spain were the new winners. Celebration ensued, as you can see. And what a tournament it was. They'd already won Euro 2008. Spoiler alert, they were going to win Euro 2012 as well. But they dominated at this World Cup. No one could get the ball off them. And that proved to be the difference. So tell me how this isn't one of the greatest World Cups of all time. It had the best World Cup soundtrack of any other, for mostly. It was held in South Africa, a country that had gone through all manner of strife to get to this point, and then put on this spectacle with flair and passion. Amazing. It had the previous 2 World Cup finalists, Italy and France, just imploding on the world stage. It had Thomas Müller, Miroslav Klose, Luis Fabiano, Luis Suarez, Diego Forlan. So many players. Wesley Sneijder scoring many goals and really lighting up this tournament. It even had Diego Forlan winning the Golden Ball and not making the team of the tournament. It had Spain winning the FIFA Fair Play Award, despite the fact it got 5 yellow cards in the final. It had New Zealand as the only country to go unbeaten. No one's seen them at the World Cup since. Yeah, England was bad and the Vuvuzela annoyed pretty much everyone else. But come on, it had passion. It was different to other tournaments. And of course it had that goal, that opening goal by Shabalala. And if nothing else, it had a psychic octopus. That's right, it had a psychic octopus that was guessing all of the right results. Unreal. Best World Cup of all time. Done.